Okay. All right, let's start here. Renaldo Gouws, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me. It's my second time back, and hopefully, I'll have more fun than even the first time.
Well, I'm not going to ask you to qualify that, but it's really great to have you back, and you've become really a regular face in my home, as well as I just mentioned to you now in our little introduction chat here again. My first question, I guess, now that you're back in politics, is: am I now talking to the podcaster or the politician? And the question inherent in that is: does being a politician, or will it limit your ability to be Renaldo Gouws? Express yourself the way we've gotten to know you, or do you have to be a little bit more careful now that you are
Mm.
formally back in politics?
Yeah, so it's a very good question because when I was part of the former political party I was part of, there was always discussions about my YouTube channel, about my podcasting, about my social media behavior, which to me didn't really make sense because to some extent it's still canvassing. A lot of people and a lot of political parties are stuck in this old method of thinking that is how you reach your voters. You phone them, or you give them a pamphlet, or you send them an email. So I think that, I've seen the change over the last couple of years. But still, ultimately, I was kind of seen as a problem child by some in my
Hmm.
former political party. And for a
Yeah,
long time, I believed that that would limit me, into what I could achieve in politics, in the sense of, remaining a councillor, not going to parliament or not going to the provincial legislature. And ultimately, when the list came out, I think just before the elections, I was in an electable position to go to parliament. So I was very shocked considering, how much opinions I got, but from some people with regards to how it will negatively affect me. But the
yeah.
point that I'm leading to is since I've now joined the Freedom Front Plus, in actual fact, before I joined, I had a conversation with Corne Mulder and with the dagbestuur of the
Mhm.
Freedom Front Plus. And it was said unequivocally, Ronaldo, be who you are, because what I am on my YouTube channel is what I am in real life. This is not a character that I'm playing. What I
Yeah,
say on my live streams, I will defend in real life. And what you see here is what you get with me. So I
yeah,
was very happy to hear that they said, we actually support what you are doing because, of course, there's a swear word here and there that we might not agree with, and you
mhm.
might do a stripper chat that people don't understand what's going on. But ultimately, you are who you are, and
Yeah,
that is what they came back with. And I'm happy to report that no, my YouTube channel and my podcasting will go on, and I will definitely be involved in politics and do the utmost to convince people to vote for my political party. So I'm
yeah,
very happy. So there's not really a balancing act anymore. There
yeah,
used to be a balancing act previously. Whenever the benefits was reaped, then there would be no complaints. But
yeah,
whenever somebody had a complaint, then that would be the end of the world with
yeah.
the former political party. But now that's not the case. So there's no a balancing act here. If I want to make a video on a topic, I can make a video on a topic because Corne Mulder and the leadership and the Freedom Front Plus trusts me to do the right thing and to speak on, stuff that I know things about.
Did you move to the Freedom Front Plus because the DA did not want to have you anymore? Or did you kind of felt that you were growing also in terms of your politics more towards what the Freedom Front Plus will represent?
Great question. And it's very interesting because when I stood as a candidate for parliament, um, there were three big promises that the DA made to the electorate leading up to the 24 elections. The first one was that they will fight the BELA bill. The second one was that they would fight the NHI bill. And the
Mhm.
third one was that they would fight the expropriation bill. Then the election happened, and I was high enough to go to parliament, and I was very happy. Finally, it was quite a massive achievement. I was 41 years old at the time. You're relatively young to go to parliament, I would say. And then when we were there, then obviously the GNU negotiations started happening. And then the video came out of me. So then this turmoil happened during that period. But I remember that I still sat on a couple of caucus meetings in Parliament. And a lot of the members of parliament for the DA in that caucus were saying, well, Severe Garube is now going to be the Minister of Basic Education, but we are against the BELA bill. And
Mm.
if this becomes an act, then she will have to implement it because
Yeah.
she is the minister. And then it's the same thing with Dean McPherson, who is the Minister of Trade and Industry, I believe. But correct me if I'm wrong. I think so. Yeah. But anyway, what I mean is that ultimately the Expropriation Act falls under his mandate, so he has to implement it. The point that I'm leading to is whilst the situation with me was unfolding, I was starting to, feel very uncomfortable with the fact that the DA campaigned against these three policies. And then the first thing that Cyril Ramaphosa does in the seventh administration is he signs these three bills into law.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the argument from the DA is, oh, well, this was signed into law, or this was already approved in the sixth administration. But my argument is, but then why did you campaign during the
Yeah.
election on these three things that you were going to stop if you knew that there was nothing that you could do about it? Because at the bare minimum, this is blatantly lying to your electorate. But they've come out with the excuses. And during those caucus meetings, a lot of the members of parliament for the DA was also like they asked, where is the line in the sand? Where is
Yeah.
the red line? Where are we going to say enough is enough? We don't want to remain in the GNU if it means that we have to sacrifice our values and principles. Now,
Mhm.
before we got the answer to that, the termination of my membership with the DA happened. And I'm sure a lot of people, have heard me talk about this, but I will just say this. A 3-month investigation ultimately found me guilty of one aspect, which wasn't racism. It was just not
Now,
declared.
sorry, Ronaldo, this is now a 3-month DA investigation that you're talking about.
Yes, 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 yes. So
Mm.
I'm still talking about the DM. I'm not. I'll
Yeah.
get to the Freedom Front Plus. And please tell me if I'm explaining
No, 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 no.
the
I
answer
want to
too
go.
long.
I want to go there because one of the things that I thought about was, it seems to me that you explained to the DA the context of the K word, that this
Mm,
was not meant in a derogatory way, that
mm,
this was used in the context of trying to explain or make an example of, or try to explain something to somebody. That's the
mm.
first thing. So if they'd known that in this 3-month investigation, it will appear to me that I have the impression that they were just not brave enough to back you at the end of the day. Why did they not back you? Why did they
Well,
drop you like that?
it goes even deeper than that. A lot of the public doesn't know the following. As an example, the DA was aware of the video in 2013 already. By the
Hmm.
way, the video was something that when I went through the Young Leadership Program, I decided to delete because I understood that in a couple of years of now, the Overton window might have shifted so much that what would seem reasonable in 2010 to explain, how would you feel if this is being said instead of
Yeah,
kill the boer, kill
yeah,
the farmer? It's a
yeah,
very rational argument to make. But because of the Overton window shifting so far to the left, now you can't use words to even explain a scenario. So I feel really bad for professors that teach history in this country because they won't be able to explain the word. They'll have to reference it as the K word, and then, it loses all meaning. But that's besides the point. The important thing here is that the DA was aware of it. Secondly, um, during that period in 2010 to 2013, that video was viewed over 100,000 times. And also, it was covered on Third Degree, which at that time was the biggest political show on South Africa. So you can imagine that, let's say 500,000 people watched that episode on Third Degree, and 100,000 people watched my video because that was the number of views that I had when I deleted the video. Now, through that 3 years, nobody complained, nobody reported me to the Human Rights Commission because they understood the context.
yeah,
And during those times, when the media was still reporting on, racial incidents, they would reference the full word. They wouldn't call it the
yeah,
K word.
yeah,
They referenced it, the word that it was. So anyway, the DA then, after me explaining all of this, after a 3-month investigation, and even a contradiction by the constitution of the DA itself, which says that if you've declared something once, it is considered always declared. That is
yeah,
what Helen Ziller herself said when she was asked during this investigation. What is her take on it? And the take was that once declared, always declared.
Yeah.
And I declared this video on 2 to 3 occasions.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
ultimately, they created, I don't know, a new law that suddenly said, oh, no, no, but Ronaldo was technically wrong. So
Yeah.
anyway, the Federal Legal Commission of the DA came out and said, okay, Ronaldo, you are guilty of not declaring the video, but our recommendation is that you return to Parliament. So your social media needs to be limited a bit. You need to perhaps get somebody to consult with before you post something, like I'm a child. But anyway, that was the FLC's verdict, which said that I could remain as a member of the DA and I could go back to Parliament. That was a
Yeah.
3-month investigation. In one day, the federal executive overruled that decision and said, no, no, no. This one thing that he's been found guilty of is so severe that his membership has to be terminated. So
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
terminated my membership, and ignoring the FLC recommendation. So 3 months of investigation apparently is not as good as one day in the federal
Yeah.
executive meetings. But then I asked for the minutes of the meeting so that I could see how did they, get to this conclusion. And they refused to share that
Yeah.
information with me. I've launched 2 PIA applications just to get the minutes of the meeting because I want to know who was behind it and what did they have to say. And I
Yeah.
think that I'm privy to this information because obviously I was a member of parliament for the DA, and this ultimately led to me being kicked out of the DA and losing my seat as a member
Yeah.
of parliament. And to
Yeah.
this day, even right now, this is now currently with the PIA, I think, internal investigator, and they're going
Yeah.
to decide on whether or not I can get
Yeah.
access to this information.
Yeah. Well, I must confess to you, I don't even make it as complicated as what it all is. It's just a matter of if they knew the context and they trust your character and they respected you, they should have stood by you during that time. And to me, it is just kind of a lack of character. It's a lack
Mm.
of balls. You just don't have the balls to say. And let me ask this question now, because now you're a member of the Freedom Front Plus. Do you think they would have treated the situation in the same way?
No, they would have treated it completely differently,
Mm,
because of past experiences in the sense of seeing how they defended their own members and their own councillors and members of parliament. I think that I was a sacrificial lamb for the GNU. I think that I don't have the evidence yet because I don't have the FLC, or not the FLC, the Federal Executive's minutes of the meeting. But my suspicion is that happened when they were still negotiating positions with the ANC, and I think maybe the donors or the ANC put pressure on the DA to say, listen, just get rid of this guy and focus on the GNU. But
mm,
unfortunately, you can see a pattern because a similar thing happened to Andrew Whitfield that was, kicked out of his
yeah,
deputy minister position, and the DA didn't really make a lot of noise. And the same with Emma Pell. So
yeah,
the DA has got this bad habit of throwing, people that are loyal to them under the bus.
yeah,
But in conclusion, the reason that I decided after a year to join the Freedom Front Plus is because I had conversations with, people within the Freedom Front Plus. I read through their constitution. I had a look at what they stand for, whether or not I agree. And I looked at different political parties. And ultimately, then I had a conversation with Corne Mulder, who in February, I think, became the new leader of the Freedom
yeah,
Front Plus.
yeah, yeah,
And I was
yeah,
very excited over that because I would often see Corne Mulder's stuff come on up on my feed, and I would watch it, and I would go, "Did he watch one of my videos?" Because he's saying pretty much the same thing I'm saying.
yeah,
So then I did a deeper dive, and I had a meeting with him, and then
yeah,
following that, we had a meeting with the Dagbestuur. And then yes, it's a natural fit. I yesterday actually I established my own branch in Nelson Mandela Bay for the Freedom Front Plus. So I feel
fantastic.
right at home. I think that it's not a massive leap for me at all to go from what I would consider a center left party that unfortunately have lost their way and is now becoming a moderate to far left political party to a
Yeah,
party that is center right. And even if it's moderate right, it's still not what mainstream media is framing it as, which is a far right or a right wing party, which the Freedom Front Plus is not. That would be the RV beer.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that is
Okay.
what led me to eventually join the
Well,
Freedom Front.
I must say, I had an interview with Rob Hershoff the other day, and he mentioned Corneille Mulder and referred to him as one of the most seasoned politicians in South Africa. And I must say, I agree with that. Corneille Mulder is certainly one of the most excellent politicians
Mm.
that we have in South Africa. But before we depart from the K word now, just the last, and just for the fun of it, I read it and I had a bit of a giggle by myself when I read that. Obviously you were found guilty and obviously you had to apologize and you went through the whole ritual, and I don't want to do anything that will affect all of that, but
Mm.
it is though quite sort of funny that you had to go for a diversity sensitization
So
course or session. That's
um,
tell me about that.
here's the fun story out of that. And listen, also I have to give credit to the Eastern Cape provincial portion of the South African Human Rights Commission. They are actually very kind people. It was great engaging with them and interacting with them. But the one thing that I'll say is, obviously, there's a perception that has been put out there by the media on who and what Ronaldo is. I mean, the fact that they aired 7 seconds of a 6-minute video to the entire South Africa already paints you as, what they perceive you to be.
Yeah, yeah.
So part of the agreement was, and by the way, I wasn't found guilty. It was a settlement. We came
Uh,
to an agreement, and then
okay.
I said that I will gladly go for these things that you want me to go for, because when I was a counselor, I visited
Yeah,
townships. I assisted with soup kitchens, a lot of
yeah,
things that people don't know. So anyway, we went to one of the schools for an oversight. And it was a school that I actually assisted when I was a counselor. So when I got there, the lady that was part of the South African Human Rights Commission was trying to introduce me, and everybody was coming to give me a hug. And we were like, "Yeah, so did you do this?" And you could see like she was quite surprised, because she
Being
was like,
funny, you have to admit that.
yeah, because she thought, oh, she's going to expose me to, the dark side of schooling
Yeah,
and how the underprivileged. And I was like, yeah, but I actually helped them, with getting
yeah.
electricity. And,
Hmm.
and so that was hilarious. But I have to say, look, I mean, I understand that the South African Human Rights Commission sometimes it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't. So it's a very difficult position for them to be in. But I
Yeah,
also told them, next time, perhaps before you just go and open a case blindly, do some research, because, we've got Gayton McKenzie as another
yeah,
example of it.
yeah.
They opened a case within 12 hours of that article coming out on me. They opened a case. With Gayton McKenzie, it has now been, I believe, a month and a bit, and they still have not opened a case. Why? If you want to stick to the basics, which is Ronaldo uttered the K word,
Yeah,
Gayton
yeah.
uttered the K word, why
Easy to
did
kick you,
you?
Ronaldo. That's why.
Yeah, well, there we go.
Yeah, yeah. Let me go back to that, and I want to hear this. Please indulge me a little bit. Diversity sensitization. I mean, I have in my mind this idea there's some sort of non-binary, pansexual, Marxist, feminist, I'm going to say it, lesbian woman who stands in front of such a group of in such a session. I mean, what did you learn from it? What did you take from it? And please forgive me, South Africa Human Rights Council. I'm not trying to minimize this sort of stuff, but it is really quite funny and ironic because I know, you know, racism is something that you kind of have a gut feeling for it immediately, and I certainly cannot put you in that camp. I don't think you needed a sensitization course. So
Yeah, I
just
mean,
give me a feel of it, Ronaldo. What was it like?
so
What
they
happened?
didn't actually do a sit in class thing. They
Oh,
they actually took me, on a road trip, and then during that we were just having conversations in the car. And
okay.
then one of the questions, which clearly indicated to me that they didn't really know who and what I was what do you understand with privilege? And I was like, well, in what context are you talking about it? Because, there might be five white family or five different families.
Yeah.
Three of them are very wealthy and the other two are poor, so
Yeah.
is privilege applicable there? And then they went, yeah," but I knew that they were referencing, white privilege and what we were talking about of the legacy of apartheid. So I think that, and this is not just a problem with the South African Human Rights Commission. I believe that this is a problem with woke leftists in South
Mhm.
Africa, is that they think that people on the center or center right do not understand what the legacy of apartheid is and what damage it caused to South Africa. I think any reasonable person can understand that, if you were oppressed for 40 years, you are definitely not the best person that you could have been if you weren't limited, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of the woke leftists and, perhaps a portion of the South African Human Rights Commission doesn't understand this. So when they asked me those questions, I actually answered it probably textbook style as to what they wanted to lecture me on.
Yeah.
I think it also didn't help them that the area that they took me to, I actually raised over 200,000 Rand for one of the
Yeah.
orphanages
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So the point is just, I think that beyond what might have been taught, I think that the fact that the left and the center and the right don't communicate or speak to each other, and they rather stick to their own little bubbles, is what is also causing this massive misconception. Because
Yeah.
let's be realistic, I think uttering a word doesn't define whether you are racist or not. It's based on the actions that you
Yeah.
have and how you treat people. I think that is far more important than using a hurty word. That is what I call it. Because we also have to understand that the word has different contexts, in different situations. In actual fact, as part of my defense, um, with the South African Human Rights Commission, I typed the word in on Google Maps. And there are still two places in South Africa that has that name attached
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
fontaine or boom.
Yeah.
And I'm just so if you now tell somebody in a conversation, hey, did you see this boom? But you use the full term, is that
Yeah.
person now a racist?
Yeah.
This is what it ultimately boils down to.
Yeah,
But
I was going to ask you about that as well, because of course I sit here in Amsterdam, and I had a discussion about 2 weeks ago with a very prominent black podcaster who used that word at least 5 times
mm,
during our discussion, and also a kind of off the cuff reference to nothing malicious, nothing derogatory. It was just,
mm,
and then I'm going to say it, and I'll say it, and I know I sit here in Amsterdam, but yeah, my mother used to call her hard claim,
mm,
the word,
mm,
etc. So for me, it's about the context, but it brings me to the question about whether we've given apartheid in our history a place in our minds, in our hearts, or not. Because I have the feeling sometimes when I talk to, especially black people, obviously, but also young white South Africans,
mm.
there's a great misunderstanding of what apartheid was all about. That we've
Exactly.
turned apartheid into some kind of a caricature. And
Mm,
we've put it in the league of the Holocaust. And we've put it in the league of Joseph Stalin.
mm,
We've made a kind of a kind of perversion of the real history. And
mm.
one of the things I would like to see is actually a revision of our history, to put these things into context and to try to make people understand what are we talking about when we talk about apartheid. I'll give you one little simple example. I interviewed a young black man not too long ago who said to me, well, things have changed for the better because we are not in a situation anymore where white policemen would come into the townships to murder our babies. Now, that's not the truth. So
That's not
there's
the
this
truth.
kind of really perversion of what, and I think the word making it a caricature that has occurred in the meantime, that it seems to me that neither young black people or young white people really actually understand fully what apartheid was all about, the history of apartheid, et cetera, et cetera. Should we not revisit that?
I definitely think we should, but the ANC would never do that because if you actually
Mhm.
boil it down to brass tacks, look, I don't think you or I are trying to talk about or to put apartheid in a positive light.
Absolutely not.
There was clearly some laws that were just inhumane, right? But the whole concept of apartheid was separate development. That is
Mm.
what the term directly means. And I think that if you had to remove the race-based laws and if they tweaked it in a sense where both races or all races were benefiting equally, we would have eventually ended up with a state model, a federal state model like the United States. Do we go and call the United States racist for what they've established? Because there's a clear distinction between the South of the United States and the East and the West. There's different. I mean, the West, I would say, is very liberal. The West or the South is very conservative. So ultimately, I think that this vilification of apartheid to the point where everything of it was evil and everything was bad, even the power stations that were built, the dams that were built, the infrastructure that was given through apartheid, everything is bad. I mean, you can't work like that. But you see, unfortunately, this is the mechanism that the ANC is using time and time again to ensure that they regain the support that they have by scaring people, by saying,
Let,
"Oh, if you're going to vote for a different political party, apartheid's going
let,
to come back." But
let me, you,
because that excuse is failing, the new
yeah,
excuse is, "Oh, if you vote for a different political party, the social
yeah,
grants are going to be taken away." So there's always this tactic, and the reason that apartheid is getting worse and worse in the sense of how evil it was is because the ANC is getting more and more desperate. That
yeah,
is why.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think you've got 30 years of carrying this burden. I think that's one thing that is important to talk about. And when I talk to people about it, I can see and feel. I talk about in private conversations now the anger that people
Mm,
have towards the government and towards using this word called apartheid as the tool to put you in your place. And I
mm,
sometimes wonder, am I the only person in the world who seem to understand, and I've spoken to some very smart people about this, that the concept of apartheid really grows from the concept of polarization, which was founded here in the Netherlands 100 or 200 years ago. I'm not quite sure on the history of that, and that
mm,
polarization. And I want to explain this to you if you don't know this. Is uh, we have a saying here in Holland, and this will explain it to you. Elke mens naar zijn eigen waarde. Each
mm,
person in accordance to his own value. Also, each group in accordance to their own value. Polarization in pillars. We have in the olden days, we had a Catholic pillar, and we had a Protestant pillar, and we had a communist pillar, and we had this pillar and that pillar. That is the base idea of where apartheid comes from.
mm,
It's when Hendrik French Verwoerd studied here in Maastricht and in Leiden University, the concept of elke volk naar zijn eigen waarde, each group of people in South Africa, the Zulus, the Xhosas, the Vendas, the Afrikaners, the whatever the case might be,
mm,
that was the idea of all of the, and it's a very progressive ideal if you really analyze it. Elke mens naar zijn eigen waarde. What can be more beautiful than each human being in accordance to his or her own value and identity?
mm,
And that's so there's a massive misconception about where does the philosophical ideas of apartheid come from, whether we could argue that it became perverse and it was badly instituted, etc., etc. But
mm,
I think it's a very good thing for us to go and revisit these things so that we can try to understand and unfathom our own history
mm.
to heal.
And you
So,
you also have to, sorry to interrupt, but you also have to understand specifically for the Afrikaner where this comes from. Because when you look at Afrikanerdom, and the two Anglo-Boer wars that we fought, and with the concentration camps and the women and children being placed in British concentration camps and nearly being wiped off the face of the earth, and then trying to make Africa their home because they are all the Dutch, the Germans, and the French that moved from radical governments that tried to kill them, to South Africa. Eventually, the Afrikaners wanted, like the Jews, their own place to call their own. And I think that is also why, they wanted to preserve their culture. And even today, Afrikaners, I think it's the youngest language on earth, Afrikaans,
yeah,
unless there's
yeah.
a new language that came out,
You touch on the heart of it all there,
which it just
Renaldo,
boils to
because
in self-preservation.
yeah, the very first thing about apartheid that one has to learn is that it was actually to actually enable the Afrikaners, the Boers, not to anglicize.
Mm,
So it was anti becoming Anglo-Saxon. That was the first call.
yes.
And then, of course, we can now start going deeper into that and understand that within the context of the time, et cetera, the only solution that one at that stage had, and don't forget, and I'm not talking in favor of apartheid. I'm just merely
Mm,
saying understand that apartheid was not something that a bunch of Boers got together in the pub one evening, got drunk, and thought up this incredible system in which we are going to suppress people. That's
yes.
That's not the truth at all. But we're far away from the subject that discussion that I want to have
I
with you. I
love
want to get back
philosophical
to.
questions and discussions, though, so that's why we
I
were
think
going.
I think these are discussions we ought to have, and I think we should have them. And I think there are very learned people in this world who can tell us a lot about all of this if we can only allow ourselves the space to actually open our minds for this
Exactly.
discussion. And I think Black people and white people need to have this
Mm,
discussion. You
yeah.
chose for the Freedom Front Plus. Are there specific policy ideas that you find in the Freedom Front Plus that you did not find, or that's different from that which the Democratic Alliance offered you, from a philosophical point of view or from a practical political point of view, that you thought, I align better with this because of this policy or that policy? So are
Yeah, I
there
mean,
specifics?
so the one that stood out to me the most was minority right protection.
Mhm,
Especially if you look at what is happening in South Africa with, kill the Boer, kill the farmer being
mhm,
said by the Constitutional Court is an acceptable thing to
mhm,
sing,
mhm, mhm.
which I once again find so ironic. So the literal asking for killing of people is not hate
Yeah,
speech,
no,
but
no,
using the K word, to reference something is considered you can never speak it is unacceptable.
yeah, yeah,
So that with the race-based laws and the BELA Act that wants to limit Afrikaans as a language, all of these things eventually is going to only lead to one thing, and that is, the Afrikaners either leaving this country or, having to suffer something that might potentially become a genocide.
yeah,
If you look at the stages of genocide, and I'm not one of those people that think that the majority of the people in this country want to inflict a genocide. I just think that it is something when people get desperate and when people, look for an obvious enemy, something like that could happen. But if you look at George Stanton, I believe's 10 stages of genocide,
yeah,
we meet 8 of the 10 requirements. And this is
yeah,
not me speculating, this is me stating what is fact. And if you just look at the rhetoric by, the ANC, the EFF, MK towards Afrikaners and white people, I think it's fundamental that we need to
yeah,
look at minority rights. We've got a hundred and what is it, 143 race-based laws in this country that discriminate against young white people that were born, out of apartheid. They were born in this new democracy, and yet they are discriminated against because of the color of their skin, something that they had no control over. So that is one policy that really stood out to me, and also the self-beskikking,
mhm.
the sense that you can look after
Self-determination.
yourself, that you
Yeah,
can self-preserve, because this is one thing. Unfortunately, I think that liberalism, and especially far left liberalism, has given us is this notion that your culture isn't important. What is important is that we all just get along and that we all become this unified mankind. No, what made us great is the fact that we had different cultures with different beliefs. And, you take a little bit from this culture, you take a little bit from that culture, but ultimately you preserve what you have and you make it better. And that is what makes us stronger as human beings. Look at what's happening in the UK at the moment. It is absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that people are now being persecuted for just saying, hey, I love my culture and I want to
yeah,
preserve where we come from and I want to preserve that for future generations. That is now considered evil and bad. And ultimately, these are the two main things that stood out to me is the fact that we need to preserve minority rights, so that everybody can be equal in this country. And secondly, the fact that if a culture want to develop themselves and want to improve themselves, let them do it. There's nothing racist about it. There's nothing wrong with wanting to preserve your culture for the future generations.
yeah, yeah. With regard to the idea of multiculturalism, that I think is also one of those really base discussions that we need to have in South Africa. That I don't think I was sort of hoping it would be part of the national dialogue. Is
Mm.
really going back to see, what has happened in this multicultural ideal of South Africa. The fact it appeared to me, and I heard somebody saying this the other day on television, is that there is no such thing as multiculturalism. There's always one culture that will either rise out or dominate. So
Well, let
there,
me
there
give you an
is no, and
example. let me
and
give
then
you an
you get into
example
the
of that. Is
yeah.
sorry, I interrupted you.
No, no, please
This is when you have a YouTube channel, you tend to do this, and I'm sorry, I'm
go
interrupting you
ahead.
as the host. But an example of what you've just said is, let's use Orania.
Hmm.
Orania and Kleinfontein we can actually use. So these are cultural towns that want to, preserve their culture and want to ensure that it goes into the future. Condemned by every single mainstream media outlet in South Africa, by politicians, it's vilified, it's made this evil thing. But then you've got the Ingonyama Trust that is preserving Zulu culture and actually gets grants from the government, got gifted thousands of hectares of land. And this is praised and this is
Yeah,
considered, oh, what a wonderful gift. Now everybody can experience Zulu culture if they go there. So, what exactly is the difference between the two? Because
yeah,
both of
yeah,
them are preserving their cultures. The one is getting a lot from the government and praise, and the other one is being condemned and getting nothing from the government. So, that is a perfect example of what you've just spoken about, of this double standard when it comes to what
yeah,
is at play
yeah,
here.
yeah. I want to make another share something else with you regarding multiculturalism and one's own culture and closeness to your own culture. The Afrikaner in particular gets it very hard and tough in South Africa because we really do have a very own defined language and culture in South Africa. I spoke to the new director of the Zuid-Afrika House, that's the South Africa House here on Keizersgracht in Amsterdam. It's a kind of a library of Afrikaans, a library in the heart of the city. And she had done a study on different cultures and your connectedness to your own identity.
Mm,
And her study shows now, after 10 years or something like that, that the stronger your own sense of identity and culture, the more you are able to, she calls it in Afrikaans, um, in English, it would be roots and wings. The
mm,
stronger your roots, the stronger your identity as an Afrikaner or as a Zulu or as a Xhosa, whatever the case may be, the stronger your wings.
mm.
So you have a strong self-identity. You are also able then to live within other cultures, more accepting of other cultures. It strengthens your ability to allow the room, the space for other cultures to blossom and to live and to breathe. So it's a
It's
very good
actually
thing to be closely connected to your identity.
it's beautiful what you just said, because I mean I've got a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
I'm a very principled Afrikaans Christian. I consider it my foundation. And I went over to Oman to go for a business conversation over there. And Oman is 100% a Muslim country.
Hmm.
And I had the best interaction with people there. I was asking them about their faith. I was asking, okay, so, in Christianity, this is what we believe, this is how we do things. They
Yeah.
were very friendly. They were saying, oh, but this is why we do what we do. This is why we, at a specific time go and pray. And if I was insecure as a Christian and insecure as an Afrikaner, I would not have had that conversation with them. And
Yeah.
ultimately, I would have not learned more about their culture. So I
No,
fully
because you're
agree,
so strong in the
100%.
sense of your own identity.
Exactly. Because if I wasn't as confident, then I would be scared to, offend, or I would be scared to, ask questions. And this is unfortunately, what this whole multicultural society has given us.
Yeah.
They've
Yeah.
painted this picture that the only way that you can ever be considered a nice human being is if you treat every single culture
Yeah.
exactly the same, with the same amount of respect. But my question is, how can I possibly respect Hamas as a culture when they do what they do? Do you understand? It's like at some point in time, you have to say, okay, this culture is practicing things that I don't agree with. I can respect it, but if it's bad for mankind and if it's going to lead to a lot of problems, and I will say something controversial now, circumcisions in South Africa and the fact that young men die because of a
Ritual.
outdated cultural
Yeah.
thing that has to be exercised. Look, I
Yeah.
understand, it's becoming a man, and there are a lot better ways to do it. I'm not saying that it needs to be stopped. What I'm saying is there are some aspects in every single culture that
Yeah.
can be modernized and can be improved. And the fact that in 2025 we still have many young men dying because of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
practice, at the end of the day, you can call me what you will, but the fact
Yeah.
that I want to have that young man actually live their lives and not die,
yeah,
If you want to
yeah,
call me a racist or a bigot or something because of that, then I think that your moral compass is not correct.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, there's so much. What you it's funny because a good girlfriend of mine who is a very big documentary maker here in Holland and has done several documentaries on South Africa always talks about that contradiction in South
Mm.
Africa, these conflicts in South Africa. She would always say, you see these handsome, well-dressed young men and women walking with their modern Apple telephones in the street, and yet tomorrow they go into the mountains where they partake in a ritual of circumcision and
Mm.
to establish their manhood or whatever the case might be, the old, and that that's part of the identity crisis that I think that
Yeah.
we have in South Africa. But let's move on to the next section of our discussion here that I've mapped out for myself for you today, Ronaldo. I want to get to know your worldview a little bit better. And I thought there's a interesting way to do that, and it will be as follows. To try to find out how you think, I want to use Charlie Kirk as my point of departure. Charlie Kirk recently assassinated, world news. Did it surprise you that there are so many fans and supporters of Charlie Kirk in South Africa, as seemed to be the case?
Um, well, no, and the reason for that is because I actually watched his content. I think a lot of people became aware of Charlie Kirk after the assassination took place, but I've been watching Charlie Kirk for a very long time, and obviously, if you're a South African YouTube channel, when you talk about this on your live streams, a lot of people will respond and say, "Oh, I love this," or "I love that." So I knew that he had a massive following in South Africa.
Mm.
So and what happened with regards to, I don't know if you want to follow up the question, but I'll speak on the Charlie Kirk situation. I think what that has shown, not only the United States, but has also shown South Africa, is that conservatism is alive and well. If you watched the memorial service for Charlie Kirk, and the amount of people that were there, and the amount of people that were praised and worshiping, and the amount of people that believe in conservative values, and how that resonated with a lot of people in South Africa too. I mean, there were a lot of places where you could go and put flowers down for Charlie Kirk around South Africa.
Yeah, I
That I
saw.
think did surprise perhaps not necessarily Afrikaners or English South Africans, English white South Africans, but I think it definitely sent shockwaves to the woke left to realize how many conservatives there are actually in South Africa. Because our stats show that 85% of the population is Christian in South Africa. Now, you have to be a little bit conservative to, be a Christian,
Yeah,
especially if you believe in the commandments and if you, read your Bible. And I
yeah,
think that is where the silent majority falls in South Africa. The ones that aren't vocal on social media, the ones that don't lecture people online. It's the guys that and girls that just live their lives and try and stay out of politics and just earn a living, spend time with their friends and families. So I think that gave a massive woke up call. And I say woke up call because of the woke people in this country.
yeah,
That alerted them to the fact that they're not as big as what they think they are. There
yeah,
are a
yeah,
lot more conservatives in South Africa than liberals, and
yeah,
especially woke liberals.
yeah, yeah. Do you know where the term woke comes from?
I believe it's a awakening, and the very very old definition of it is because the problem is people say when you now say, oh, stop being woke, they go, oh, but are you against enlightenment and
Yeah,
considering somebody else's point of view? And it's no. The
yeah,
term has changed. Ironically, just like the original K word meant non-believer.
yeah.
The same with woke.
Kafir. It's an Arabic word.
Yes, yes, that
Yeah,
believes not.
yeah,
And look, I mean, I understand in South African context it's got a different meaning altogether.
yeah,
I'm not defending the word. I'm just saying that words change.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
um, yes, I understand the original meaning of woke, and yes, it was great
yeah,
because back in the day, when I
yeah,
think when people started with it, it was like, oh, okay, you're considering other people's point of views, you're putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and walking a mile in it. But it has changed to now just being standing on a pedestal,
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
show the world how
yeah,
amazing you are, and it's all about followers. It's all about the grift that you just want to make people think that you are as so nice and kind. But
yeah,
we've seen what woke culture has given us. I mean, it's actually given us somebody that thought it would be acceptable to go and stand on a roof and kill somebody for just speaking their mind and not
yeah,
actually causing any violence.
yeah,
It's gone so far left because the woke left believe that words are violence. They literally believe that words are violence. And when
yeah,
you believe words are violence, then you think that you should take on that violence with
yeah,
actual violence. And that is
yeah,
why Charlie Kirk, at 31 years old of age, were brutally assassinated by a woke leftist.
yeah, yeah.
And I mean,
I personally think that the wokies are
mm,
waking up to the fact that they've been too woke, that it's
mm,
gone too far. But the concept, the idea behind it, the word woke really found its space and place in society during the American Civil Rights Movement in the
yes,
60s.
yes,
Awokeness, the awareness of the other. That in
mm,
itself, you must agree, is not a bad idea.
not at all.
So,
It's
yeah,
amazing. It,
yeah.
it's a wonderful thing to do, and that is what I did. From 2010 up until about 2014, where as a young white Afrikaner, I put myself in the shoes of a young black individual.
Mhm.
But I also understood.
That's what Jesus teaches one, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And, I also, though, unfortunately, this is where I differentiate from actual woke leftists, is that I realized that that person was put in that unfortunate situation and that the legacy of that still affects them. But I'm not going to blame every single white person I know and meet and say, you are the cause of it, when in actual fact, that is taking it too far because
yeah,
now you are just creating this cycle that is never ending. And what's going to happen is you are going to create young white people that are going to become, racist or going to become more hardcore in their stances because they are just accused of being racists. So
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
never-ending
yeah.
cycle that eventually
It's
needs to end.
backfired. And I think that people on the left, so-called woke people, I think that they feel it. I think the
Mm.
Democratic Party in America is deeply conscious
Well,
of how it's actually turned against them. But I always say, Ronaldo, that it, I'm always trying to find the sort of the balanced view. I always try to find the middle. So I want to go back to Charlie Kirk. I'm not a fan of Charlie Kirk. I was never really that aware of Charlie Kirk, and I'd watched a lot of Charlie Kirk in the meantime, and I'm not that impressed.
mm,
But I understand why people are, and I understand what Charlie Kirk is all about. But there are edges, and I want to talk to you about the edges now. I know that you said somewhere, if I'm right, I might be wrong. I read somewhere that you called for the death penalty in South Africa. Did I
that's
read it
correct.
right or wrong?
Yes.
Yeah. So I got a little quote here that I've got a Charlie Kirk thing. He advocates for executions to be public,
Mm.
quick, and televised as a deterrent and moral initiation for society. Obviously, my question is, do you go that far?
No. No, I don't go that far. Look, the point of the death penalty for me is an eye for an eye. It is
Hmm.
not to humiliate, it is not to deter, because we've seen there's been many studies around the world that shows that the death penalty doesn't actually deter people from
Yeah.
committing murder.
Yeah.
The point for me, the most important thing for me is that you have taken. So, firstly, I believe the death penalty needs to be implemented for three and only three cases: for rape, for murder, and child molestation.
Mhm.
And the reason I believe that is because I believe that you cannot rehabilitate somebody that is willing to do those things. You cannot rehabilitate a rapist, you cannot rehabilitate a child molester, and you cannot rehabilitate a murderer. And that is why I believe that if you take a life or if you scar somebody so much that for the rest of their life, you have
Yeah.
robbed them of their future because they might not find happiness ever again. I believe that you should not have the right to have happiness, even if it's a small happiness where you might get a cigarette in a prison cell.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe that what you have done should be done to you. And that is why I believe, you should not be a burden on taxpayers because that is what happens. They get 3 meals a day. And yes, I understand prison isn't the most comfortable place, but let's be real, sleeping out on the roads, versus sleeping in a cell with 5 or 6 other people. I know a lot of people that would rather sleep in a prison cell than sleep out in a winter night on, a cold road in South Africa. So
Mhm.
it's not so much about deterring. It's not so much about teaching, the person a lesson. I just think that it's justice for the family. It's
Yeah,
justice for the
yeah.
victims.
Yeah, I understand what you say. I think you're right. The science is out on it that it's not a deterrent. There's
Mm,
been many, many, many studies about it. But what I think, and I'm just pulling this out of my head as I'm listening to you, is that I do think that something like the death penalty, and I'm not saying I'm an advocate for the death penalty, but I do
mm,
say it will have a deterring effect on other types of crimes.
mm.
It will scare the hell out of people to commit other sorts of crimes, is what I'm
Yeah.
saying very unscientifically now. Let's talk
So,
about,
but
sorry,
also,
you were
just
saying?
before we go off, just on a principled stance, I support the death penalty on principle. I don't support the death penalty in South Africa under the current government
Hmm.
because I don't trust the government and I don't trust the court system. I mean, if you've got a constitutional court that says kill the Boer, kill the farmers is fine to sing publicly in a country that's got 84 murders a day and a violent sexual crime taking place every few seconds. I don't trust that court system to decide on who lives and who dies.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I would support it in, let's say, the Netherlands. I would support it in the United States. I wouldn't support it in South Africa with the government and the
A
justice
place where
system that
there's
we
at least some integrity to believe in. Just about the kill the Boer, kill the farmer thing. If I have the opportunity to talk to Julius Malema, I must say to you, and I'm just being sarcastic and downright nasty now, I would say to him, well, carry on singing your song, Malema, because you have no idea how much damage you're doing to yourself. You have no idea how in the long term you're actually sitting here and destroying yourself. I had a chat with Jaco Kleinons when he was in the USA, and he said wherever he is in the USA and he stops at a petrol station to tank some benzene, petrol, whatever, people knew. People knows about Julius Malema. They know about. So I know it's a very dark thing to say, but in a sense, I would say to him, "Do your thing, my friend, because you are
I
destroying
do
yourself in the
I agree
process."
because it's like Icarus that flew too close to the sun because
Yeah,
he
yeah,
he got comfortable, and the thing is you can't really blame Julius Malema because he is what he is, right? He was always somebody that wanted to be controversial, that wanted he is a racist. I'm sorry. Julius Malema is clear as day. He's a racist and he hates white people.
yeah,
Um, but with that being said, the thing is, he got away with singing the song. He got away with VBS. He got away with when he started the EFF and how it grew. But everything, always also comes with the if or but or terms and conditions apply. And the terms and conditions in 2025 has hit him hard, especially over the last year and a half. His political party went from double digits to single digits. It
yeah,
moved
yeah,
down behind the MK. Then he lost Floyd Shavambu. He lost Ndlozi out of his political party. Then he got found guilty of hate speech, which means he's a
yeah,
convicted racist. And
yeah.
then, I think a week or so ago, he was found guilty of, well, he's a
Gun,
convicted criminal now of
yeah,
discharging a
yeah,
firearm. So
yeah,
not a
yeah,
good year and a half for him, and a lot of
yeah.
people will say it's karma, and I will wholeheartedly agree with him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But after this verdict now, don't you get the feeling that the pendulum is swinging the other way now? As I
Mm.
said now that he's beginning to move towards his own end, his own destruction.
Yes. Yeah, so I don't believe that he'll get jail time for it, but it doesn't matter. The moral of it is and the eventual outcome of it is that at least we starting to move in the right direction again, where
Yeah,
it is, a popular black individual can be wrong. A popular black individual can be a racist. It can be a criminal. It's not something that has race associated with it by just him being guilty. It's more than
yeah,
that. It's
mhm,
it's not just white people that's evil and bad. It's not just white people that has this connotation to it. And I think that we're moving in the right direction to say, hey, guess what? Everybody can be a racist. Everybody can be a criminal. It's not just white people. It's not just black people.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm still trying to, everything for me is on a scale. So I said
Mm,
also of Charlie Kirk, what he says, I put it on a scale and I try to find the middle way. So um, back to my Charlie Kirk, balancing your views against his views. He talked a lot. He talked a lot about LGBTQ
Mm,
gender issues. In June 24, on his podcast, he praised a Bible verse calling for the stoning of death of gay people as God's perfect law when it comes to sexual matters.
mm.
So I guess my question again is, do you go that far in your view towards the so-called LGBTQ community?
Not at all. I'm actually somebody that over the last, I would say, 10 years, have supported the LGBTQI plus community before it went to radical. I
Mhm.
assisted in Nelson Mandela Bay as a counselor to hoist the biggest pride flag in Africa. On many pride rallies in Nelson Mandela Bay, either DJ'd or I MMC'd or I helped because I've got a lot of friends in the community. I've got family members that are gay. So no, I think that obviously that is not my stance on it. I do, however, believe that unfortunately, when you've got a grouping, when if you look at LGBTQI plus, every single letter represents, and then the plus encompasses so
I
much
know,
more.
I know,
I,
my goodness.
and for me, I believe that the trans movement is what derailed the LGBTQI plus community. I think when they started saying a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man, when they started saying that you can, start transitioning at the age of 4, 5, 6 years old, and that men can participate in women's sport,
Yeah,
that is when it went too far.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and
yeah,
and specifically, the one thing I think which probably cost them the sympathy from so many people
yeah,
was
yeah,
when they said that if you misgender me, you are a bigot, you are
yeah,
a homophobe. And I think that is when you want to dictate to some people what how they should address you, and that your own principles doesn't matter and only theirs matter,
yeah,
that is
yeah,
when they cross the line.
yeah,
Because I'm not going to, buy into your delusions. If you have two testicles and you've got a penis, you are a man. No matter how many times you dress up nicely and how even closely you look like a woman, and then if I call you by your manly name, or if I say you or he or this, and you want to then insult and belittle and attack
yeah,
me,
yeah,
I'm not going to buy into that delusion of yours. And I
yeah,
think
yeah,
that is where that entire movement went completely woke, and that
yeah.
is when everything went wrong for them.
Yeah, but it never really took off, though, Ronaldo, if you're honest. I mean, this whole they, them whole thing, and nobody's walked into that. Nobody's taken that seriously at the end of the day. And I'm
Because
in
it went
full
too far.
agreement with you.
The
Yeah,
pendulum went. The pendulum swung too far to the left.
it just became ridiculous that they were
Mm.
they, them, that. I mean, I don't even know. I know I interviewed somebody who had gone through a whole gender uh, change operation, a reassignment, or whatever the correct term might be. And I, just for research purposes, went into this whole LGBTQ list and so on. There was something like 400 different, 100 perhaps, maybe I'm overstating it now, different sexual identities, or it became so confusing that one just got totally lost in it. But let me tell you what I do think, where I do look upon it all with softer eyes, is when I listen to the people that were part of the 60s revolution in the United States, social revolution, the hippies in the United States of America, and the idea of every revolution needs a street clown.
Mm.
So we need a couple of crazies to push out the message there, more or less is
Yeah.
what I'm saying. And in that sense,
But
that is how I also viewed this whole thing. Is now sort of going a little bit too far, but I understand you have to be the clowns and do your finger up to society, et cetera, because you're communicating a political point. We
mm.
got the message. It's time to move on.
But that's exactly where I agree with you with the going too far, and but also the fact that we need to acknowledge mental illness. And
Hmm.
I say this not as a dig to the LGBTQI plus community, but to, like you said, the extra 400 terminologies. At some point you have to go,
Crazy.
okay, this isn't real life. This is you having a mental illness, and it needs to be helped. But instead of being dealt with, they were praised and that they were lifted up to say, oh, yes, you feeling this way is 100% legit. When, a psychologist or a social worker would have done the right thing and say, no, 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 I think you need to be on an antidepressant or you need to be on some medication just to bring you back a little bit. Because some of the things that I heard was just, it's actually absurd. There was a study done in which they said, well, pedophiles can't help being pedophiles. And, we also have to understand how a pedophile, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
when it comes to things like that, I mean, it's very clear that
Yeah, but
no,
it becomes, and I also don't want to confuse pedophilia now with your sexual orientation, because I think that's
no,
also
for
not
sure. I'm just
entirely
using
correct
an
to do.
example.
But it is. I was shocked to learn that there is a pedophile club or organization here in the Netherlands, and they are registered. And I suppose the motivation behind that is for people to be able to share with one another their particular pain or whatever the case might be.
Mm.
I'd never been to one of those pedophilia
Hopefully
meetings,
not.
but they do exist.
Yeah.
And of course, I call that into question as well. But I will say that it doesn't mean that these street clowns should deter from the fact that there are people that legitimately have a right to their own sexual identity and a
Yeah.
right to express that sexual identity is the
Mm.
point that I would like to make, and I'll just ask you if you agree with me. And I will motivate it by being very personal in the sense that I will tell you that one of my dearest friends in South Africa that I have a great, in fact, only digital, but a friendship with, happens to be the woman who became the first uh, um, transition, what do you call
Mm.
it, sex change operation in South Africa, who had undergone in the 70s the
Mm.
first sex change operation. I interviewed her, and subsequent to that, she was born a man and became a woman at the age of somewhere in her 20s or something like that. And she's today a very well established, very attractive, very lovely, beautiful woman. And I cannot see her in any other way as exactly that. So,
Mm.
and that's my experience with her as well. She's written a book about it. I will be, I'll mention her name just for reference, Elise Bishop, well-known writer in South Africa,
Mm.
well-loved writer in South Africa, is an example of somebody who was, for me at least, who was born biologically male,
Mm.
but was in her soul, her psyche, her whatever it is, a
Mm.
female, and had undergone this operation back in the 70s with great success. And I have met her as a woman, and I have never seen her as anything else
Mm.
than a woman. So once again, I'm just trying to say that there's somewhere balance in all of this.
Yeah.
There's something in it. Let's not throw everything away because
Oh,
of
of course.
the street
My
clowns.
my stance on this is very clear. What two consenting adults do behind closed
Yeah,
doors is none of my business. It's none of the government's business.
yeah,
Also, if you feel that you are trapped in the wrong body and you as an individual want to make a change, all power to you. If you
mhm,
feel that you are a woman trapped inside a man's body and you transition, that's fantastic. I've
yeah,
got two openly trans people that are subscribers and members of my YouTube channel, and they get all the support and we treat them exactly like they want to be
yeah,
treated.
yeah, yeah,
The
yeah,
problem
yeah.
comes in when you want to dictate to me how
Exactly,
I should feel about your transition
exactly,
and
exactly.
wanting to police me on my wording on
Yeah.
how I treat you.
I'm
So I
in
think that makes sense.
100% agreement with you. And on top of that, I always say to people, make sure protect the children and protect animals. That's
Mm.
that's basically
They
my
can't protect
my
themselves. They
yeah.
need protection.
That's and don't force anything down my throat. And I really don't believe if you're a man that turned into woman that you have a right to take part in women's sport. It's as simple as that. It's a
Exactly.
non-brainer to me. It doesn't even need discussion, and I'm terribly sorry if I offend people in the process.
I'm
Another
not
another
sorry.
of Charlie Kirk's ideas, Ronaldo, or his views, he talks a lot about abortion as well. It's a
Mm.
hugely sensitive topic, and I must confess I am 68 years old, and I simply still have battles in my own head about this topic. When confronted with the hypothetical scenario of his 10-year-old daughter being raped and
Mm.
becoming pregnant, Charlie Kirk responded, "The answer is yes, the baby would be delivered."
Mm.
Are you with Charlie, or are you saying, hold on, there is at least maybe some room to maneuver here?
It's very interesting because I was very liberal on the stance until I actually, because remember that quote, and I think a couple of the quotes that you are giving, it's once again, I can
I'm going
identify
for the
with it.
extremes here, Ronaldo. I'm
No, no,
really
no, no.
particularly looking for the extremes here.
No, for sure. And what I'm saying is like, and I'll give some context on the last one,
Yeah,
because just like with me, a 7-second snippet was used, and I think if you read the entire conversation or you listen to it,
yeah,
his
sure.
argument fundamentally is that life is life. So
Hmm.
whether or not it's at conception, or whether or not it's a 90-year-old, life is life.
Yeah,
Nobody has. If you murder somebody, then you go to prison because you killed somebody, you took their life away from them.
yeah,
In the same, when that question was asked to him, he says, yes, because if there is a life growing in my daughter, nobody has the right to kill that. And he approaches that from a religious point of view, from a
yeah,
Christian
yeah,
point of
yeah,
view. So my stance on abortion used to be a woman can decide what she wants to do with her body, it's her choice. But as I've gotten older and as I've become more conservative, because
mhm.
the saying, if you're young and you're not liberal, you don't have a heart. If you're old and you're not conservative, you don't have a brain.
Yeah,
Um, it's the same thing that applies here. If you look at how many abortions take place across the world every single day, it's a genocide every
yeah,
single day on lives that could have been lived. And
yeah,
yes, good and bad. You prevented serial killers from being born, but in the same way, you could have potentially killed off 50 Elon Musks or people that
yeah,
could have found a cure for cancer.
yeah,
So based on that, I truly believe that life should be preserved at all costs because it's become so convenient in our lifestyles that if you have unprotected sex and you fall pregnant, hey, don't worry about it. You can just go to an abortion clinic and they will quickly sort you out. We're not
yeah,
treating life as life. And when
yeah.
you start doing that, that is when society starts going backwards. And if you look at the state of the world right
Mm,
now, it is a clear indication that we do not value life anymore. Look at
mhm.
what's going on in Gaza and in Israel. Look at what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. And the example is what it eventually ends up with is my stance is I fully agree that we need to protect all life because
Yeah,
also with that being said let's use the worst case example, which is if your child has been raped.
yeah, yeah.
um the life that is growing inside of her, that life didn't have any hand
Hmm.
in being born a crime, you
No,
know. So, in the same way that, children in today in South Africa, white children should not be blamed for apartheid, the same argument can be had for that child, that life that is inside that womb
yeah,
didn't commit the crime. Yes, it's born a crime, but I feel the same way with him on
yeah,
that stance. And
yeah,
look, it
yeah,
has been a radical change for me over the last, I would say, 2.5 years.
yeah,
But that is after listening to the discussion that Charlie Kirk had, listening his reasoning on why he believes that life is important. Because
yeah,
I think if you understand that what he values life to the point of even if it can't defend itself and even if it still sells, it is
yeah,
still alive. And
yeah.
therefore, that viewpoint is what made him make that
Yeah.
controversial statement or at least agree to that statement.
Yeah, let me just cover off with then the question is the argument for many people, of course, is also when does life begin?
Mm.
Would you say at the point of conception, that's when life begins for you? Or do you say, no, there's some scientific evidence this way or that way? Are you clear on that, that it begins at the point of conception?
For me, look, I mean, I'm at the
I know
moment.
it's, I know these are controversial.
No, 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 that's fine. I believe, and look, the stance could be completely wrong because I can do more research, but I believe the first heartbeat, when that is life to me, when the
Yeah.
first heartbeat starts occurring, that is life. Now, I would say 4 or 5 years ago, I would argue that life, you could have bought as I would say reasonably late because I valued life then as when you have your first thought, when you can
Mm,
think for
yeah.
yourself, when you understand that you are somebody, that you are, what is it? You have consciousness. you understand who and what you are. But like I said, over the last few years, that has changed drastically. At the moment, it is at the first heartbeat, but that once again, that might change as well. That could
Yeah.
change to conception.
Do you
I
have
am
any
going through that
idea?
process.
Do you have any idea, Ronaldo? And I'm really ignorant now. I'm just talking about the principles and things like that, not the science. Do you have any idea at what point the first heartbeat can be
I think it's
detected?
weeks. It's after a couple of weeks. You
Okay.
can see that when the first heartbeat takes place.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, okay. Let's bring it back to South African politics. Do you still have time?
Yes, of course, I can go for hours.
um, 30 years of African National Congress government. I always say to people, and this is why they accuse me of being a lefty, I was one of the people that jubilated here in Amsterdam the day of the elections in 1994. I, as you know, had the privilege of having met virtually the whole leadership of the African National Congress during that time. And a lot of these people did impress me immensely. So you can imagine how deeply myself, and I think many other people, are disappointed we are that here we are 30 years later. And Nelson Mandela and the Rainbow Dream and all of this sort of, one almost wants to call it nonsense today, has collapsed so spectacularly
Mm.
that even my most hardcore old anti-apartheid buddies that I knew at the time kind of confess that deep in their hearts there's also a sense of not only disappointment but actual disgust as well.
Mm.
Like, really? Could this have
Mm.
happened to us? So, um, a failed state almost. That's what some people say. Is it ideology? Is it incompetence? Is it greed? Is it corruption? If you were the doctor that we're now diagnosing the patient,
I think
what went wrong?
I think it's all of the above. I think it started off with, people that truly believed in the cause. Like when the ANC was established, it was people that were principled, people that wanted to see change. And then if you just take 1994, if you look at Nelson Mandela, and I know there's a lot of people that feel different ways about Nelson Mandela, and he was a terrorist by the definition of what he did, and he went to jail for it. And
Mhm,
we can argue about whether the term was too short, too long, all of that. But the point is, when he was released, I think it was in the early 90s.
mhm,
Um, what happened was he decided, and look, he had a very angry ANC that was ready to go and go into a civil war with white people. And for whatever he did before that, to me, that doesn't matter because ultimately he saved us from a civil war.
mhm,
And the quality of leadership that the ANC had at that time was far greater than what you have now because it's like with anything in life when the hard work needs to happen, there's not a lot of people doing it. But when times are good, a lot of people jump on the ship and they enjoy the ride. And that
mhm,
is what has happened to the ANC. The people that were, the thinkers, the philosophers, the people that wanted a better South Africa, they died off in the ANC, when Nelson Mandela passed away. Thabo Mbeki, I would say, was arguably the last decent president. I mean, we could talk about the HIV crisis that he didn't, resolve and led to hundreds of thousands of deaths. But the economy was still growing. The country was still moving forward. And then, we got Jacob Zuma and then we got Cyril Ramaphosa. So I think it's a deterioration of the values and principles of what the ANC was when it was established over 100 years ago. And then, of course, greed comes in because you've got communists and you've got socialists that suddenly buy Ferraris, buy Lamborghinis, buy Bentleys, shop at Louis Vuitton, shop at Gucci. And then you start enjoying, the capitalistic perks. And then suddenly you are only a communist when it comes to ideology and not necessarily when it comes to earthly possessions. And that is why we are where we are right now. It's because we have people that are Johnny come latelys that joined the ANC, and they just joined it for the perks. They don't join it because they actually believe in the founding fathers' vision, and what it stood for. The charter. They don't believe in the charter. They're just here
mhm.
to gain positions. And also, with that being said, the quality of politicians in South Africa, I would say, is arguably some of the worst in the world. These
Yeah.
are individuals that wouldn't get a job to run a tuck shop at a school, but they are put in charge of hundreds of millions of rands. And it all boils down to the fact that the ANC and now the GNU sees itself as a social welfare state, and they want to try and look after their cadres and look after the people that are loyal to them. And this is
Hmm.
why we are where we are, because we've got the Zondo Commission that fingers a lot of people, and these people are still not arrested. They're still
Yeah.
not in jail.
Yeah.
There's just no
Yeah.
consequence management. So
Yeah.
ultimately, it's all of the above, all of
Hmm.
what you've said, being corrupt, wanting to steal money, self-enrichment. It's all of the above. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, the reason that it's going on for so long is because we don't have a strong mainstream media like we did in the
Hmm.
70s and 80s and early 90s in South Africa. Because if we had a strong mainstream media, they would have called this out long ago, and the international community would have been aware of this long ago. Look at what happened with Donald Trump in February when he made the executive order. Suddenly, the entire world was looking at South Africa, and it wasn't a pretty picture because they could see
Hmm.
the race-based laws. They could see Julius Malema and the EFF singing "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer." They found out about Pala Pala. They found out about all of these things that I would say the global community didn't want to acknowledge, because South Africa to them was 1994. Everybody walked into the sunset singing Kumbaya, and forevermore, South Africa was this rainbow nation. They didn't want to give up on that because, I believe that South Africa was the first true multicultural experiment for the world. And they don't want to look now and see the utter failure. And I don't think that multiculturalism would fail everywhere. I think the
Yeah.
ANC has caused it to fail.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the world's view has changed in the meantime, and you are now allowed to criticize Nelson Mandela, even
Mm,
here in the heart of Amsterdam, Amsterdam, amongst the most liberal of liberal people. I
mm.
can assure you that the picture is well painted and very clear. But my question sometimes is don't you think that it is in a country where I read the other day 8 million South Africans go to bed with not enough food or hungry or partially hungry. 8 million, 8 million, 8 million
Yes.
people. And then you've got a president who is a billionaire. Isn't there something quite disgusting about just that when you bring those two ideas together?
Mm.
And
And I
doesn't it
mean,
seem to you then, and this is the question that I want to lead into, it from the little bit of evidence that is surfaced in the meantime, isn't it clear that the African National Congress was simply just bought as an organization
mm,
before and during CODESA? And talk about the urban foundation and the deal makers, now let's use that nasty word, white capital. Let's not say monopoly capital. Take the monopoly out of it. Just
mm.
power capital in South Africa simply bought up the whole bunch even prior to freedom. Isn't that penny dropped in the meantime in the minds of most people?
Yeah, I fully think,
Well,
well,
let me add this thing, if you don't mind. Just what I'm trying to say is that why are we surprised at this stage about all of this? Because if wasn't I think Malema said it at Oxford University that getting rid of apartheid was a transaction. And the
mm,
transaction meant that people like Cyril Ramaphosa and name a couple of other names became overnight millionaires and billionaires.
mm,
Um, isn't that the very first seeds, the creation, the very foundation of the country is actually
mm.
built on corruption?
Yeah, so I believe that they obviously were enticed by the money because
Mhm.
for the longest of time, these leaders, were working from the underground. They were exiled. They weren't allowed to enjoy the perks of, living a good life and working hard. And then in 1994, I believe that there was this, well, actually the early 90s, there was this belief of, oh, we feel so sorry. We need to shower them with gifts. And if you look at Cyril Ramaphosa pretty much has been gifted his wealth. He was
Mhm.
gifted mining shares, he was gifted the rights to McDonald's in South Africa. So nothing earned, unfortunately. And I believe that this was probably one of the worst things that could have been done. Because if you are going to shower people that were used to having not a lot in life with everything they've ever wanted in life, then that sense of entitlement kicks in very, very quickly. And your consideration of your ideology changes fundamentally, where you will be able to speak a good game when it comes to communism and socialism, but then live your life like a capitalist. And I
Yeah.
think that this is what we have seen time and time again in
Yeah.
South Africa, especially over the last 31 years, where they will gladly call each other comrades and cadres and cadres or whatever you want to use. But when it actually comes to practical how they live their lives, they've got multiple homes, they've got multiple cars, they buy at Western shops. The very thing that they fundamentally despise and hate, if you look at their principles. Because if you look at the EFF, and I was actually called out by a news publication because the EFF was making a speech of how Western society is so bad and how capitalism is the worst
It's
thing. But
ridiculous.
she was reading the speech
Mhm.
from her 45,000 Rand
Yeah,
MacBook, you
it's
know?
ridiculous.
So ultimately, I think yes, the fact that the world felt so guilty and showered the ANC and these cadres with
Yeah,
millions
and
and
I
billions
want
of
to, I
rand.
want to, I want to interrupt you there because I must say that I don't like the word felt sorry and showered them with the guilty, feeling guilty, etc., etc. I want to get. Why can't we just simply say it right out that it was a cold transaction?
Yes.
It's a simple, straightforward transaction. They were just bought. Why can't we just simply say that and acknowledge that?
Mm,
That's, I mean, and I'll tell you, let me motivate it in a very simplistic way, and I cannot go to court on this,
mm,
but I'll tell you this little story. Karel Niehaus, as much as he is despised by every single, at least white person in South Africa, and quite rightly so, I would say for 99% of the reasons, he was the ambassador, one of the first, second ambassador of the new South Africa here in The Hague, not too far away from where I live. So obviously I had contact with Karel Niehaus, and obviously Karel Niehaus dined in my house, and obviously we talked about all of the stuff and so on. And I remember then already, the then Ambassador Niehaus told me in my house at the time, many, many years ago, that during the CODESA meetings in Kempton Park, if I remember it correctly,
mm.
when the first African National Congress negotiators arrived, they would arrive in minibuses, those mini taxis that are so South Africa is so famous for. That was on day one, week one. Week two, they would arrive in more sophisticated taxis.
Mm.
By week three, they would sit in the
Mercedes
back
Benz.
of the Mercedes Benz.
Yeah.
It happened at a fast and rapid pace. It
Mm.
happened right in front of our eyes. And while this was happening in front of our eyes, we were sending off the balloons and we were going, Hail Nelson Mandela.
It was the
And they
white and
sold
blue
us a
balloons and that.
spectacular. Let me say to you this. I read the other day something like 4 billion rand it was spent on the marketing of this new South Africa.
Mm,
So if that is something that we just, I mean, obviously, I think it's already investigated. I think there are investigative journalists who've got the stories. There's probably books about it out already. Why don't we just simply say it out and accept the fact that we are perhaps, that would be my argument, to some extent co-responsible for the situation in which we find ourselves
mm,
because we corrupted them from it was South Africa was the pillars of our society was constructed on corruption.
mm. I would
Is that
wholeheartedly agree with
controversial,
you.
or is what I'm saying controversial, or is it
No, I think the
becoming
evidence is there for everybody to see. If you just look, I mean, just over the last 2 days, you've got so many people that the SIU, the Special Investigations Unit, has been raided, and I think what surprised a lot of South Africans is that one of the police chiefs live in a three-story mansion in Sandton
yeah, yeah,
with three Lamborghinis, and this person is supposedly paid a little bit more than a member of parliament, so a little bit more than 1.3 million rand. Where does that money come from? So the point that I'm leading to is I don't think it's controversial at all. I think that
Yeah,
we have truly only scratched the surface of
yeah,
corruption.
yeah, yeah,
We don't know, like if we think state capture was bad, wait until the ANC loses power and the actual evidence
yeah,
comes out.
yeah. I'm waiting for that day as well, Ronaldo, to be
Mm,
very honest with you, because I must confess to you that I'm really, really deeply disappointed as well. And the suffering of South Africans are huge, and it affects. I mean, I can't sit here with a bleeding heart because I'm far away from home. I don't have the immediate suffering of this as you guys do, but I talk to my family. And in my heart of hearts, I'm a South African. I'm still
mm.
part of that country, and I must say I'm quite disgusted in many ways. Let's move the discussion on to, and then we'll start winding down. Um, the current situation in South Africa. I alluded to 12 million people going hungry every night. Um, the big question at the end of the day will remain this, I would call it maybe stress between the free market on the one hand, and you made a reference to it, the handouts of government, the social element of it all, or the age-old discussion, fight between capitalism and socialism as a model for South Africa to at the end of the day develop the people of South Africa, and for us to move out of this dark phase in which we find ourselves with 12 million people going hungry.
Mm.
What is your view? Are you a hardcore? By the way, I spoke to Darby Root once, who told me that if I use the word capitalism, I'm old-fashioned.
Mhm.
I think it's free market is the preferred terminology now. Are you a totally committed free market man with the promise of save South Africa through the free market system, or do you see a place for government in terms of development and social upliftment?
It's very technical because, look, I understand that, when you have a free market economy, that means that, there could be one or two players that can completely dominate the market, and that's not good for
Mhm,
business. So there are
mhm,
some limitations to a free market system. But I do believe that government involvement should be as little as possible. Government should create an environment for jobs to thrive. Government should not create jobs on their own, because then you get a nanny state and you get this social welfare state that we have in South Africa, where I think we are one of the highest countries in the world that employs in the public sector, not the private sector. So most jobs are actually created by the government, and
yeah,
that model is never ever going to work. So I believe in the free market economy. I think that it's fundamental to let people decide and dictate what works and what sells and what not. But I do believe that there should be minimal governance interference with regards
mhm,
to just ensuring that there aren't monopolies that come out and prevent development and technological advancements in the free market. So yeah, I that's what I believe. I believe limited involvement from government.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The reason why I'm asking you the question is because, and I had this discussion, as I said, with Rob Hersov the other day as well, a man that I really have absolute respect for. I think you guys work together
Yeah,
on
me too.
this new platform form as well, and of
Mm,
course, and Rob is quite rightly, of course, a fighter for let the market free, just
mm,
undo all the regulations and things like that, and I did a little bit of a study on this, and I asked some questions, and I want to refer to this you to some of this stuff. Um, we talk about a fundamental question would be what kind of economic growth would the free market have to deliver to be able to emancipate South Africa economically, South Africa's people? That's, I think, obviously what the free market people will say as well, is we need to what they say, it's sort of undo all the regulations and so on, and let the market free and create business, and in the way we will emancipate South Africa's people. I spoke to Pitt, Professor Pitt, what is his surname again? Uh,
um,
Krokamp,
yes, right, yeah.
Krokamp, not too long ago. And he, in his angry voice, told me that about 90% of young people that matriculate today will, for the next 40 or 50 years, not find a space within the formal work sector. That's devastating kind of a future that he sees. And the question then is to the free market supporters that are talking about, let's loosen the wheels on all of this. How much would be needed in terms of economic growth in South Africa to be able to remove our people out of poverty? So I'm going to read you what my findings here are that I asked Grok to help me with. We have at the moment a very low annual economic growth rate. And according to the specialists, it will take an annual growth rate of at least between 7 and 8% sustained over a 10, 20, 30-year period for South Africa to be able to emancipate itself, to free its people from the poverty that we're talking about. Do you think that's possible? Do you think that is the answer, the free market, unleash the power of the free market? And do you think that we can achieve that kind of economic growth in South Africa, 7, 8% sustained over the next 20 years to just make a dent into the situation as it is today? Or is the promise too big, is my question really?
Yeah, so look, I think if we remove red tape and we allow businesses to not have to, comply with idiotic race-based legislation, and businesses that don't even do deals with the government now have to comply. If they employ more than 50 employees, they have to adhere to some random broad-based Black economic empowerment code. If they remove all of this and they just allow us to, be a global player in the sense of producing things for the rest of the world, then I think that we could at least cut the unemployment by half. But even if our economy grows, I did some research the other day. If our economy grows by 5.4%, then by 2030, we would have been able to cut unemployment from roughly about, or not unemployment, sorry, we would cut poverty where people suffer below the breadline from, I think it was 63% to 54%. So even if we do that, it's not good enough. So we are going to need a miracle in order to, fix what the ANC has given us over the last 31 years. Because like you said, also an uncomfortable conversation to have is that during apartheid, we had lower unemployment. During apartheid, the economy was growing a lot more. And during apartheid, the crime rate in this country was a lot lower. Now, those are difficult conversations to have, especially, with woke leftism still kind of having, one hand on the steering wheel. But eventually we will be able to have that conversation and get to the point where we have an honest conversation with each other and say what needs to happen in this country to cut unemployment and to cut poverty by half. But even if we start growing by 6%, it's not going to, at least for the next 10, 15 years, have a massive change. So we need to either get into something unique, like make ourselves, the server capital of the world where, we've got the climate to put solar panels up and to host servers. If we can do something like that, that fundamentally changes the future of our country, I don't see it changing in the next 10 to 15 years. Or improving drastically.
I think it's clear. Statistics don't lie. It's what it is, and the data is what it is. And you're absolutely right. The murder rate, the rape rate, the crime rate, all of that is ridiculous. It's unbelievable. But I want to read this to you. Roughly 9% annual growth will be needed over an uninterrupted 10-year period to cut unemployment to around 15%. So that's moderate. We talk about then a 9% annual growth. I think what have we got now? 0.1, something like that. Here's the other interesting facts that don't lie. The average annual real GDP growth rate for South Africa from 1970 to 1994, the period that you just referred to, was approximately 2.2%. So So we talk about a dismal 2.2% during the time of apartheid. I made an interesting, got some interesting research the other day that showed that South Africa, never since we became a union of South Africa, reached a growth rate of more than something like 6.7% back in the 60s.
Mm.
So what are these statistics, and this is the question I'm asking, is if that's the case, if you unleash the power of the free market, as Rob wants, as so many other people are advocating, you're clearly not going to be able to deliver to the people, the mass of the people of South Africa over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Plus, your achievements will remain minimal. So the question remains then within those statistics that I'm sharing with you now, there are 19 million people that receive grants, I think, now per year in South Africa. My question is going to be this, and this is, I think, the hard question that should be asked is, what happens to them? What are we going to do with those people?
Hmm. So, from my former party, and also what I believe currently is, I believe that nothing stops crime and nothing stops a bullet faster than a job.
Mm-hmm.
And the question that we need to get to is, what do we need to do to start ensuring that the unemployed get a job, whether it is, it all boils down to, the honor that you have in and the pride that you have in yourself. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that if you give somebody an opportunity to better themselves, we can get to that point. But because the ANC has created this nanny state and also this welfare state where people can just have as many children as they want and they will get a social grant, they can, not even look for jobs anymore and they are guaranteed that amount of money. I think that is just voter buying by the ANC. It's not actually looking at the future of this country, because I truly believe that the ANC has moved from actually wanting to improve South Africa to just wanting to gain or keep control of South
Mm-hmm.
Africa. Because not every cadre has received their millions. The people that you hear starting to squeal and talk about what's wrong in this country and what's wrong with the ANC are the ones that aren't benefiting, and they feel that if they don't let the skeletons out, then they've achieved nothing. So ultimately, what we need laws in this country that ensures that the rest of the world knows that we are open for business. Now, the one thing that I can tell you that does not tell the world that we're open for business is taking private property rights away and
Mm-hmm.
threatening expropriation without compensation.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think, and I don't understand. I don't think that people understand how severe that one policy on its own is,
Yeah.
and in causing foreign investment to not come to South Africa. You know what we have in our favor? We've got the climate of South Africa in our favor. We've got minerals. We've got everything that the West and the East needs. We've got all of these things. The fact that there is, I don't even know what the estimated
Yeah.
content of how much gas we have in the Karoo, as an example. We've got this potential where we can be a Singapore, we can be a Dubai, but we just don't go down that path because for whatever reason the
But
ANC has
but
decided.
but Ronaldo, we've this is where I say, I mean, I hear everything you say, and I want to agree with everything you say, and I do agree with everything that you say as well. Except there's not been a moment since 1910, when we were a Union of South Africa, and 2025, where we are now, where we had the kind of economic growth that is needed to get the poor out of poverty. We've had those
Mm,
resources as well. We've had those minerals as well. Maybe we've got new resources that have been discovered in the meantime and so on. But with all of that, we've not been able to do so. That's one
mm.
part of
But
of
yeah, I hear you. There's also a lot of factors that played part in that. I mean, remember the South Africa's resources were completely taken for free by many other countries, and they
absolutely.
managed to. So they got, as an example, so just on that alone, if that was based on a trade deal,
Hmm.
then we would have had the economy would have grown by 10, 12, 13%. I'm just thumb sucking here, but if that, as an example, was done on principle back then, and then we've got the Great
Yeah.
Depression, we've got so many things that is also factors on why the South African economy didn't grow.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I believe that in today's day and age, with the advent of technology, with the advent of what is required to build, batteries, especially, with what the world is requiring, South Africa has those resources. And unlike in previous decades, it's not just the British that come here and say we'll have the diamonds, we'll have the gold, or the Afrikaner that I'm not blaming the British. I'm just using it as an example. I think that if today, with society being what it is, if we can get our resources out of the ground and provide it to the West and to the East, I think the growth rate will be exponentially bigger than what it has been over the last 8 decades in South Africa.
Yeah, well, it's the highest it's had. If you look at historic figures, would be in the 60s, something like 6.7%. I think there might be an outlier here of 8% or whatever the case might be, somewhere in the 70s. But in all of these years, we've never reached that kind of growth, and not even close to that kind of growth. It's extraordinary if it is to happen. It would indeed take a miracle for that to happen.
I have
And
to say
another
this though. Remember that during the Thabo Mbeki years, I think we got 4.5 to
4%,
5%.
4%, yeah. That falls
So
at
we
least
were
50% short of real change in South Africa
so
over a
imagine
sustained period.
imagine if we didn't have the 9 wasted years of Jacob Zuma.
Yeah,
Imagine
yeah, yeah,
if we built on that trajectory. I think that we
yeah,
would now be at 12, 13, 14%. So there's a real life example of how things
yeah,
could have been changed.
yeah, yeah,
And I do think that we can get there. I think that, with AI, with servers, needing to be built, with solar panels, with everything, the manganese ore that we produce in South Africa, I think that we have an upper hand to what the rest of the world needs in
yeah,
order to, become not first world countries, but, the top countries.
yeah,
I think that we
yeah,
could do that, but it's just a matter of whether or not we have a government that has the will to do it. And unfortunately, we don't.
yeah, yeah. Well, let's go through a couple of things at a rapid pace here. We
Right.
have to speed it up because I've taken a lot of your time, and I think we're running really over time here now. Um, Let's talk about specific. Let's talk about our pet hates. Expropriation without compensation, obviously,
Mm.
need to get rid of that. But here's the problem. Surveys show that 60% public support for those laws. And if you look at the political parties specifically and their support, 63%. Um, is it something that is achievable, or is it a kind of a campaign promise that you can't realize?
No, I don't think they can realize that. I think that our constitution would prevent that from taking place. I know that the first test case is now being, is now in front of the court, but it's based on the, I think, 1975 Expropriation Act. It's not based on the latest one. I
Mm,
believe that it's going to be in court for a very long time. I don't see, and I'm not talking about that specific case. I'm
yeah,
talking about the taking it because nobody has. I know the DA is currently fighting it, and they're going to take it to the Constitutional
yeah,
Court. Short term, I'm not too worried about that. I
yeah,
think also by the time that this technically could be implemented, hopefully by then we have a coalition
yeah,
government that
yeah,
actually does not want it.
yeah. But keep in mind that it's just exactly what you said right now. That is one of the biggest factors for the foreign investor to say, I'm not going to invest in South Africa. Black economic empowerment, BE. Same dilemma here as well. 78% of South Africa's population support it, according to the latest survey figures. ANC, EFF, Patriotic Alliance, MK, IFP support it. So you've got a majority support in political parties as well. So once again, is that a campaign promise, but a promise that cannot be realized? And my question would be slash, instead of saying scrap BEE, shouldn't it be politically more wise to say, well, don't scrap it entirely. Let's rework it. Let's see if we can find some agreement on what we can get rid of. But some of it is clear it's going to be with us for a long, 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 long time.
Mm. I think it's not an election promise. It's being implemented now, and it's even getting harsher and harsher. I mean, there's a very easy solution to this. Take race out of the equation and implement economic standing. If you do that, then you don't overlook poor white and colored people.
Yeah.
You base it just on economic standing. I mean, that is what makes common sense, because the policy as it's written right now, in 50 years from now, will be looked back the same way that we look back at apartheid. It is racial discrimination against people that had absolutely no hand in it. And you can talk about upliftment, but show me the upliftment. We've had it now for, I believe, 25 years or
Yeah.
more. Show me, if this policy was so effective, why do we have the highest unemployment rate we've ever had? Why do we have the highest poverty rate that we've ever had? Clearly, the system is not working. We need to base it on economic standing, not on race. Simple as
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I will say the following to you, Ronaldo. I agree 100% with you. I will go even further and say that B is a self-destructive policy, because you destroy actually your best talent in the country for the sake of black economic empowerment, which is being implemented in a perversely and corrupt way as well. Except the reality is 78% of political parties support it, and close to 75% of South Africa's population support it. So that's the. So I'm not talking about. We can spend another 2 hours talking about how bad it is for the system. I'm talking about what will happen in reality.
Yeah, I think it just boils down to, this is what a lot of the leftist political parties will keep on promising, because that is what will secure them votes. Hopefully, though, we get to a point where a coalition government can finish this policy once and for all, because it's total destruction and it is
Yeah,
completely racist.
I think it's dumb. I think it's as simple
Well,
as
that
that.
too.
I think I would say to the president, why would you destroy your best talent in the country?
Mm,
That's your capital that you've got. Why the hell are you destroying that? But the fact of the matter is that's what 78% of the people want, and that's what the majority vote probably would go towards. The BELA law is very, very close to the Afrikaner heart, obviously. I had a look at this morning at the statistics again. Pre-1994, we had 1,396 single medium Afrikaans schools. Lekker ou, groot, lekker mooi Afrikaanse skole waarna ek groot geword het.
mm,
Last government's sources will suggest 2016, that's gone down to 630. If that trend continues, that will mean that by 2050, 83% of all Afrikaans as single medium schools will be gone
mm.
out. Can you still do something about that, or is that just...
Well, Solidariteit has taken the initiative and built a university that's only in Afrikaans, and they on track to do even more. So I think that there is a silver lining, and it's once again something that, the private sector is showing us. If the government doesn't want to give it to you, build it yourself. And I think that is what eventually will happen to South Africa. You're going to find a lot of spaces where people move away from cities. And I remember, I think it was in the 60s and 70s, everybody was saying, go to the cities to get a job and become a professional. I think
Yeah,
it's changing now. I think a lot of wealthy people and educated people will move to small towns and set up their lives over there so that they can get away from government and, get off the grid, provide their own electricity, their own water.
yeah,
And I think that's the future. And like I said, organizations like Solidarity and AfriForum and Lex Libertas from Adam's Roots, they are ahead of the curve when it comes to these things. They just want
yeah.
to remove themselves from government interference.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, you just mentioned Aaron's Roots, Lex Libertas. I watched Aaron's latest video yesterday. I've spoken to Aaron's on a number of occasions. He's really talking about devolution of power.
Mm,
That's the big theme. And I'm just contrasting that again with I'm not saying that these are not ideals that I have in my own heart as well.
mm,
I have a particular direction I would like to go as well, but there's also another thing called reality.
mm,
So when Adams is talking about devolution of power, I noted this morning there are 257 municipalities in South Africa. Um, as of the latest available data, left of center parties such as the ANC, EFF govern approximately 178 of those municipalities. Goes back again to demographics.
mm,
So I guess this is the big argument, not argument. This is the point that I am struggling with, is that we are living in a tyranny of the majority, and we have demographics not in our favor. And then from that point I've made now, I want to just jump to the question to you, is that the party that you've just joined, and we can close with this, the party that you've just joined was in fact built, created to enable, empower the Afrikaner and self-determination, a little piece of ground that is ours, a little space that we can call, within the context of the broader South Africa, our home. I think it's section 235 or article 235 is much talked about. Conservatism created, together with, I think, Dr. Corné Mulder was there at the time, this particular article 235. Why have we not seen any movement whatsoever in that direction? Or is that a pipe dream that belongs to the past?
I think, actually, I know this. The more the ANC destroys South Africa and the infrastructure of this country, the more every single type of South African is going to wake up and realize it's not going to be a race matter. It's not going to be a class matter. It's going to be simply, we want to thrive in South Africa, and we are going to do it on our own. Now, Orania has already laid the foundation for it, and for all the negative publicity it's getting, it's still a town that is thriving. The same with Kleinfontein. I know that the Freedom Front Plus launched a mini documentary on Kleinfontein, having an actual discussion with the board member that's in charge there, talking about, what is fact versus what is fiction. And everything that you are seeing it's just removing themselves from government influence and also government control, and willing to do it on their own. And I do believe that's the future. I don't think it's necessarily just something that's going to happen in South Africa. I think it's something that's going to happen across the world. And I am fundamentally in support of this, because also, with that being said, the Freedom Front Plus went from only talking about Afrikaners to now talking about minority groups. And if you think that when you say minority groups, it only means white and colored people, you are wrong. Because if you look at the Sutus and the Vendas, they are also minority groups, believe it or not. And you've got Xhosa and Zulu that is the top. But even within Black culture and Black, cultural groups, there's minority groups within that. And like I said earlier, 85% of South Africa is Christian, meaning that they have some form of conservatism in them. And if you are conservative, then one of the basic principles is that you fundamentally believe that your family unit and your culture is very important to you. And therefore, I believe that that is why this will inevitably happen. Now, Cape secession is a completely different topic. I don't think that that will happen in our lifetime or in our children's lifetime. But I do believe that you are going to see the uprising of small communities not being reliant on the government. And the big question is, what will the government do then? Will they start interfering in that? Or will they keep on doing what they're doing? And in a sense, it's going to be a separation of small little towns doing their own thing and the government doing it for the rest of the people that didn't want to form part of that. I think that is where we will end up eventually.
Yeah. I must confess, and I said this to both Karel Boshoff and Wynand Boshoff not too long ago, I am quite a romantic in that sense. And in that sense, I really love Orania. It tells me so much about the spirit of the Afrikaner, about this cry for freedom, this right to one's own identity. My own vision of that, I'll share with you, is I believe that in 100 years, 200 years from now, Orania will be the shining city on the hill.
They could maybe rename it to Wakanda, and then we can actually have this amazing African city that, has flying cars and everything. But yes,
I love
look, I think once we can get past I think apartheid's legacy, because the ANC has, hammered on about it for the last 31 years. I think that is why this thing has not become as popular as what it should have been, because there's still some racial connotation to it. I mean, look at what Orania and AfriForum has to go through whenever they talk about it. Look at what Kleinfontein has to go through. Apologies. And I think mainstream media plays a massive role in this
Yeah,
negative
yeah,
connotation over it. But ultimately, I think, you know, people will have so many issues in this country in the next 5 years that race will not even feature in
yeah,
these complaints, because when the water runs out in Johannesburg and you can't blame a white person for it, you're going to start blaming the government for it. And eventually, we're going to get to that point where things get so bad in South Africa that people are going to forget about race and apartheid. And they are going to say, well, you are the government now and you aren't fixing it now.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then we will lead to this sudden explosion of these little towns that get completely off grid and don't rely on the government for services
yeah.
or anything.
Yeah, I can see that. Here from a European point of view, we can clearly see the more you globalize, the more there's an urgent need for people to localize.
Mm.
And I think that that's a trend that will it's manifest itself in South Africa as well. Um,
And sorry,
Ronaldo,
before you end, sorry, the last thing I'll say on that is as soon as that starts happening, people will realize that they will still have to trade and do business
absolutely,
with with
absolutely.
with others. It
Yeah,
doesn't mean that the Afrikaner is just going to care about
not
the
isolation.
Afrikaner. It's
No,
going to
no.
build it's going to build great relationships with the Vendas and the Sutus and even the English.
Yeah,
I just I think we missed an opportunity in the early 90s where we
mm,
should have become states, where we should
yeah,
have become, like the Western Cape. That it is pretty much, white people and English people love the Western Cape. So it would be a natural progression for them to go there.
yeah,
KwaZulu-Natal is predominantly Zulus. Eastern Cape is predominantly Xhosas. So if we moved into a state system where cultures move to where they feel comfortable.
yeah,
It's not racist. It's just you want to converse with somebody that can speak your language. You want to talk about similar interests. It's not racist to want to hang out with your culture. It is normal. It is completely normal. And that is why we have progressed to where we are today around the world
yeah,
because of this. And
yeah,
unfortunately, somewhere along the way, we've lost this and it started
yeah.
becoming a race issue when truly it is not a race issue.
Yeah, yeah, it'll find its place in the future as well. It'll go back. We've gone a bit full circle in this discussion now, but it goes back to the roots and wings thought that we talked about earlier in this discussion. The stronger the roots, the more the ability to actually spread the wings. Renaldo Gouws, thank you very much. I must say, I really admire your podcast, and I wish you the very best of luck with. Just tell me very quickly what is practically now going to happen in a practical sense. Do you wait for 2029 for elections before you're back in Parliament, or what is the trajectory now?
So the great thing between me and the Freedom Front Plus is we didn't promise anything to each other, and I think that is the perfect place to start. So no positions were promised from their side, and I didn't demand any positions. So
Yeah,
as it stands right now, I am a member of the Freedom Front Plus, and I'm going to assist them on a national level and also on a municipal level in Nelson Mandela Bay to fight to get more support for the Freedom Front Plus. And if that then turns out well in the municipal election and there's a possibility of a coalition, then my hopes and dreams would be to become a mayoral committee member in that coalition so that I can be in charge of a department and hopefully, turn it around so that we can actually see some positive things. And then, yes, in 2029, hopefully, well, it depends. If I enjoy myself in Nelson Mandela Bay, which is a city that I love, I've lived here most of my life. I've traveled all across the world, and there's no place I'd rather be than Nelson Mandela Bay. So if that works out and I do a really good job, then I will remain on for, as long as possible. But if for whatever reason that's not possible and a coalition can't be formed, then I will definitely put my name in the hat to become a member of parliament for the Freedom Front Plus in 2029.
okay. And this is the deal we're going to make, you and I.
Mm.
2029, you put me on that short list of the first podcasters, if I am still alive,
No, you will
to
be.
talk to in 2029.
So I will commit on this show that if in fact I do make it back to Parliament, you will be the very first person that is allowed to interview me. And then
I'm
I'm
gonna
allowed to use a couple of swear words as well on the show.
always.
Great.
Ronaldo, we're going to talk before 2029, I'm sure about that. Thank you very much. This was really lovely to talk to you. Best of luck. And I hope we're going to make this commitment of yours, realize that in 2029. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. And also thank you for the great show that you have. I watch it religiously. It's so insightful when it's long form. You get to know the person and you get to understand where people come from. And I think this is so needed, not only in South Africa, but around the world. So thank you for your contribution as well.
We talk soon.